Doesn't she hold it down?
Good evening. Ooh, nice loud mics tonight. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024, and we are here at the Durham Community School cafeteria. We have a full board with the exception of Danielle this evening. We do have a new board member joining us after the election in Durham, Stacey Howarth. Welcome. And we will get right started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes of the April 10th, 2024 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Malik, thank you. And Mara? They almost put us in a straight line. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to see everybody this way. All right, great. All those in favor? Great. None opposed. Adjustments to the agenda.
I have a couple this evening. Under number 8, we're going to add reports from the superintendent, letter C, resignations. I have a couple of resignations to announce. We're going to have 14 personnel, letter B, consideration and approval to employ a second grade teacher at Moore Street School next year, 1 year only, and a letter C, consideration and approval to employ a special education coordinator for next school year. And those are all the adjustments.
All right. So we will move on to 6, good news and recognition, and we will send it over to Lily for our student rep report.
Thank you so much. We're quickly approaching the end here of school, as for most students, college decisions will be due May 1st, and those will be finalized, which is very exciting and also nerve-wracking for some. Senior projects are also, they've all been either accepted or denied, and students are getting the signatures for those right now and will begin on Monday. The last day for seniors is Friday, which is amazing. It seems like it's approaching so fast. We have a lot of success in a lot of our new sports. Lacrosse is doing very well, and our band concert will be coming up in early May. Finally, prom is right around the corner, and quickly approaching after that is graduation. Thank you very much.
Lily's stressing me out. Thank you, Lily. All right, so we will move on to 7, public comment. I'm just going to look at Jack because he's the only member of the public. No? Okay. We'll move on to number 8, reports from the superintendent.
Okay. I'd like to update the board and the committee on our search for the Director of Instructional Support. We posted that position on March 22nd. It was up for 4 weeks to gather our pool of candidates. Last Monday, the search committee met to review applications and the process for selecting a candidate to move forward. We'll have interviews next Monday, and that will follow with a thorough reference check. And then our goal is to have a viable candidate to the board for consideration at their May 8th meeting. So I just wanted to update you where we are in that search. I want to, again, circle back. We've talked about this a lot, about bus driver shortage. And just to give the board and community a snapshot of sort of like what and where do we post vacancies? What are we doing to shake those trees? I'll just give you an idea of that. Our online system for hiring is Frontline, so it's always posted there. We post on Serving School, Indeed, Maine Job Link through the Department of Labor, Maine Municipal Association, the Career Center. In the Forecaster, there are vacancies posted there, and the DOE is paying for all Maine SAUs to post on Work in Maine employment page for free through the fall of 2024. And there was a direct link for us sent to the Forecaster for that. There's an RSU 5 Facebook page, the Durham Community Facebook page, and also the Freeport Network Facebook page. So that's in terms of where those positions are posted. Other efforts that we have from our team, job fairs, There's a meticulous follow-up of any started applications for anyone who expressed interest. So we know someone has even begun an application, we're reaching out to them. So there's a big process, and certainly, Jeremy also word of mouth, if there are people he knows that might be drivers that are looking for a job, he's reaching out to them as well. We're really at a tipping point right now for the remainder of the school year, because I'm going to announce we have a bus driver that is resigning in a couple of weeks. Our goal is covering routes and trips for the remainder of the school year, and to minimize disruptions to our students and families as much as possible. We spoke about this a couple of times before. There may be a time when I get that call and we don't have a driver to go the regular route, and we will do as much as we can, our team as much as we can, to go back and pick up those students. It's happened this year where we didn't have a driver, and I know that Jeremy and his team, they dropped and they went back and got children. So that's sort of at the point that we're at. Looking forward for what we're going to do, we're going to certainly analyze all bus routes in RSU 5 and really look at that walking distance to school. We're in the customer service business, and we've always accommodated families to the extent we can, even if they were less than that mile. But next year, most likely, we'll have to be enforcing that mile much more because we simply don't have the capacity. To recruit new drivers, we will not stop, won't put our foot off the gas on that one. And certainly, we're looking for opportunities if there is interested applicants to do our own training. So it's just important that I inform the board, the community, that's where we're at. And I know Jeremy just joined us as well, that we're just making a plea that we really need to have additional bus drivers. We appreciate you certainly. Our teachers are patient when sometimes it takes a bit for us to get kiddos to school. Our families are understanding, but certainly we're looking to continue to do the best service we can for our children. Letter B. Retirement. Jeff Dearberg has announced his retirement. He's a social studies teacher at Freeport High School. We certainly thank Jeff for his years of service to many of our own children. In resignation, I'm announcing the resignation of Connie Carpenter, bus driver, May 10th is her last day, and Ched White, who's an ed tech of Freeport High School. That was effective April 23rd, 2024. And those are all the items I have to share with the board. I'm certainly answer any questions anybody has.
So we have a policy that says if you're within a mile, that they could be walkers.
Yes, and actually the policy, Jeremy's here tonight because there's a policy about transportation that's coming up. That is a policy that we've had on the books.
Is there any, well, I guess maybe I probably should have read that closer if there's a transportation policy that states it, but is there anything about like the requirement of sidewalks?
I mean, that's the other piece we look at, certainly. If we're not going to have I think we're not going to have a kid walk up 136 for a mile if there's no shoulder, there's no place. But that's a piece of that we look at is the safety piece. But in general, it depends on the school, the community, and where those families live, if it's safe to do it. We also we're not going to have a preschooler walk a mile, down Main Street, Freeport either.
Other questions for Jean on the update? Paul.
Well, just quickly on that, we will return to that's EEA, which we're talking about later. But the just for those keeping score at home, the hazardous walking conditions on C is sort of the caveat for that one. So that's where. So again, I think we would, if we are in a situation where we need to be doing that sort of reevaluation or being a little bit more strict next year, I think that still would remain. But we would probably need to be just doing sort of have a slightly different process perhaps for evaluating that.
All right. So we will move on to number 9, administrator reports. And we will start with the update from the Durham Community School. Will Pitton.
There's a special gift to everybody this evening. I'm actually going to have our assistant principal, Kate Harrison, do the update. There's a lot of pressure on me to be succinct, which took its toll. But actually, in all seriousness, Kate is an integral part of the work we do here. So I also would like you to be able to hear her voice and as you hear about the school.
Thank you. So it's a busy time of year here at Durham Community School. This is the time of year when student growth just becomes the most apparent. And it's very exciting. We're celebrating with teachers and with students that growth that we're seeing from the year of work that they've just put in. We've also had a lot of successful events recently. We had the middle school play, which was really fun and happened to be on the same night as the pre-K and kindergarten concert. So it was the whole span of Durham Community School on one night. And then we had family coding night just before break. And then we have a few concerts. We have one tomorrow and one next week for some of our older students. Spring sports have begun. It's really nice to see the kids outside practicing, working on their teamwork skills, and just being active. This week, our K2 teachers had the opportunity to work with literacy staff developers as well as their district colleagues just to continue their professional growth and build their skill set in literacy. 8th grade students are participating in fieldwork run by Schoodic Education Adventure at the end of next week. This is very exciting as this group did not get their camp experience in 6th grade due to COVID. So the fieldwork that they'll be doing is focused on the science experiences that they've been doing the last 2 years in class with Miss Somi. And this trip will help prepare them for kind of the experiences that they're going to have in high school. So we're looking forward to that. And as we're getting ready for our 8th graders to move on, we're also getting ready for some new pre-K and kindergarten students to start. So we had pre-K parent night just before break, and then we'll have kindergarten parent night coming up next week. And we're really excited just to welcome our new youngest learners and their families, and we're excited to get to work with them. And that's our update.
Thank you, Kate.
Any
Any questions? I literally remember sitting in this room and super nostalgic, sorry, for Garrett's for kindergarten, because he didn't have pre-K yet, kindergarten parent night. And they're like, okay, it's time to ride the bus. And I got up, and it might have been Will. It was probably Will who told me to sit back down. Parents don't go. I was like, he can't go on the bus by himself. And now he's graduating in how many days with Lily? So there it is. It goes full circle. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to 9B, Finance. Kelly.
Good evening. Included in your packets this evening are the expenditures through March 31st and revenues as well. Sorry. Right now, our revenues about 75.2% collected, right on target, and our expenses, including encumbrances, are about 90.2% expended. We had shortly before break, not reflective in this document yet, we had asked our administrators to look forward and do their spring purchasing. So most of that actually was entered and will be reflective in the next document you see. So we're hoping to have a little bit more, fine-tuned number for what we might be looking at the end of the year in the next presentation.
And just in case anyone was concerned about 75% of the money in and 92% of the money out, that includes the encumbrances. So like salaries for the rest of the year that we know we're going to pay, we encumber those. So it's not that we've spent more than we should have.
Correct. And the other reason that we're down at to the 75.2 mark is because we did utilize undesignated fund balance in order to offset some of the taxation. And we really only recognize that in the event that we truly need to use it. And we haven't had to do that yet at this point. So it's not reflective in the document as a revenue coming in out of our undesignated fund into our operating budget.
Perfect. All right. Questions for Kelly? Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So board comments and committee reports, board information exchange, agenda requests. Laura?
So I know there's no easy answers to our staffing shortage, but I wanted to bring to the board's attention that the town of Freeport has been working on addressing the shortage of affordable housing in our community. And I feel that, or I've heard anecdotally, I feel like sometimes in our visits that we've done to schools, that that is one thing that can sometimes drive, staff retention or, vacancies. So I would love if either as a board, or I don't know if it would be leadership like superintendent, board chair, to communicate with the town about the impact that the lack of housing has on the school district, because I think it's just so important for our community to understand. And we've seen other communities in the region rejecting, proposals for affordable housing. I think it's so important for our community to understand that this has just far-reaching impacts, and if the folks that we employ and that work in our community can't live in our community, sometimes we are losing them to other employers. So I would really love for us to kind of have conversations with the surrounding communities and let them know that workforce housing is important to us as a board, as a school district, because it does impact our ability to hire and retain staff, which necessarily does impact all of our kids. So I just wanted to share that. I mean, I could see it taking the form of maybe a letter from the board to the Freeport Town Council, but would also be great, I think, if we communicated with the select boards in Pownell and Durham as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if there's any, I'm going to look at Kelly for this, any information that maybe the HR department collects, has seen, anecdotal or otherwise, that might talk to, is that a barrier we're seeing when we're trying to recruit? I mean, I think it makes sense logically. I'm wondering if we have any sort of firm data we could share, which would be even better. Right?
I don't know about the recruitment part of it. Sometimes an employee is willing to do exit interviews, and we potentially could collect some data from an exit interview. But I'm not sure with preventing people from applying. Like Jean mentioned, I mean, you put like MICHELLE in an application and a phone number, and we're going to be calling you to say, hey, Michelle, are you interested in finishing that application? We're doing absolutely everything we can on our side, and Ashley's actually been trying to recruit as well as administrators. We're just not really sure where to go.
And I'll say in terms, I'll piggyback on Kelly with exit interviews that I've had with people, that has not come up in an exit interview. I certainly know when we're hiring new staff and they're from another location, another state location, we're definitely telling them as we go through the process, and I have like someone who we hired from another state, that you need to start looking for housing. I think affordability is certainly a piece of it, but it's also, is it even available? The amount of housing that's available in there. That's the other thing. I think that's more just anecdotally, the bigger, I mean, it's affordable, yes, and there is no housing available for our employees, including teachers.
Just on that, it seems like we could, and I imagine the town council is already looking at aspects of this, but I think we could probably just look at publicly available information on our salary ranges, and then the either rental costs and availability numbers and cost of housing in the three towns, and just have that. I think if we did look at that information, we would see pretty quickly that they don't line up, would be my hunch. And I think that's where a lot of the drive for affordable housing in Freeport is coming from, is based on that. So I don't know whether we would want to do any of that data collection before we would write a letter, or whether the town council already has that. But I think that information is easily available.
And I'm always curious about other districts that have maybe successfully done some affordable housing, and has their school district seen an uptick in their staffing pools, right? Because that would be great data too, to show the potential benefits.
So obviously I cannot speak for, our surrounding areas, but when I was a teacher in Hawaii, it was a very hard to staff location. And for the educators and they did have teacher housing. And I know that was a big deal for people coming onto the island. And it was a huge reason why they stayed because they did have housing that was affordable. So there's obviously a lot that goes into that, but it would certainly be something to look into.
You think it was just the housing that kept people in Hawaii? Like,
Maybe
if they're struggling to find people,
maybe
I think we
somewhat
have
of
a
the
chance.
location. So, it was pretty beautiful.
Other, Tara? Carry on. All right.
Well, I believe yesterday was Bus Driver Appreciation Day, so I just want to thank all of bus drivers who are currently working for us and send out that note of appreciation. And then I also wanted to ask about policies and when it is appropriate to bring forward a new policy for review. I know that I am on the policy committee, full disclosure, and still learning about the process and when new policy, like how we review policies and when it is appropriate to say, hey, board, what do you think about adding a new policy about cell phone use, for instance? Random one. And if that's something that the policy committee just decides to do, or is this a discussion that needs to happen like now, or if we put that as an agenda request for next year? So I'm wondering if you can talk a bit more about how that all works.
I'll give you my thoughts on it, and Cynthia or Jean can certainly hop in. I think it's been done a variety of ways. I know we've had new policies introduced based on legal changes, right? So MSMA will oftentimes be like, hey, we have a new policy that we're recommending districts consider. It comes that way. I think we've seen it from the board around the memorials. That was driven from the board based on some experience with that over the last couple of years. So I think it happens in a variety of ways. I'm not sure I've seen one where policy committee sort of was the origin of it. Usually they're the recipient of like, hey, consider, go write one of these. It's usually a discussion. If it's something around, say, cell phone use, that would probably be one that we would put on the retreat agenda for discussion around like work for the upcoming year, and sort of the board's feelings on that, and whether we think it rises to what we should be putting on the plate for next year. I guess I would also say if the full policy committee felt strongly about something, then came to the board and said, we think we should be considering a policy like this, I could see that being a possible route to a new policy as well. I think Cynthia wants to say something. Did I miss any possible routes to a new policy?
No, I think you hit them all. We have a policy about policies. So we can talk about it at our next policy meeting on May 13th. But yeah, so I think Michelle captured most of it. I mean, and I also think that some of these discussions, like when we have our board retreat, if there's some issues that, like cell phone or whatever, like that might be a good thing to kind of bring up and, at that point. But, laws and regulations really drive a lot of when we change our policies and when we revise them. We just got another communication about Title IX again. So, that's going to be changing yet again. And so those are the things that drive it. And like Michelle was saying, the memorial, when situations happen, you hate to have like the knee-jerk response, but then it also brings to our attention that, we really should have something in place so that we know how to operate going forward should an unfortunate event happen again, for an example. So, but there is a policy about policies that we can certainly there's two of them actually right under B in our policies. So we haven't reviewed that, so we could do that.
Yeah, I think that it might be interest of the board to see that. Anyway, I think we all know, what was the letter or number? Do you?
Well, it's
know the letter?
BG, it's under the Bs.
Bs,
So
okay.
if you do a find and hit policy, process or policy, anything that has policy in the title will pop up.
Isn't
and then
that
you
going to
can
be like
click on
every
those.
policy in the policy?
No, no,
No.
no, no. Now that I'm saying BG, yeah, there's BG, what is it? That's the one.
BG.
Yeah, the
Okay.
BG and then the R with the, which is the procedures part.
Okay.
So that would be where, you could go to read and it talks specifically about the process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And also, if anyone happened to be Googling RSU5 policies, we noticed that there is an old link up there that doesn't have the accurate list of policies. And so that will be taken care of if it hasn't already. And I wish I could say what the actual address is of where to find the policies, but it should be.
So if you go if you're on go to the RSU5
The
site,
homepage.
if you actually on our page, then you can find it very easily there. And that was taken care of. there.
Okay,
I
good. Yes,
I can
thank you. I
confirm
thought
that.
Perfect. Well, okay, Michelle, can we add to the retreat agenda to talk about cell phone policies?
Yeah, just as a kind of maybe intermediary on that is, I think that, and it probably goes to what is in the policy on policies, but I think that and I think somebody flagged this, maybe it was me last year, of designating a moment where we have a discussion that's not at the retreat about are there any policies that we think we should be looking at. So it's more of an open conversation, but it's on the agenda and people know that it's upcoming. So for example, we are on there's three different categories. It's the what we have to do by law, what we do on regular rotation, and then what we do at the board request. And the regular rotation that comes usually from Cynthia is determining that. But we have some wiggle room on that, like how, whether it's 5, 6, 4 years that we're doing that on. And I think it would be helpful for us to have a moment every year when we have a moment to say, all right, is there anything that we just think we really need to look at? And as a board, so then we can have those ideas in the room, and then we can then have a conversation of how feasible it is or which of them should arise. Because I know there was also recently an email sent sort of wondering about whether there is a policy that currently covers the problem of AI deepfake photos. And so I think, again, it's not, I'm agnostic on whether the cell phone policy or a policy surrounding that should be addressed first, but I think there does need to be a venue in which we talk about that kind of question before we decide what we're going to be reviewing.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, one of the struggles with that kind of approach is sort of the vastness of our existing policies that I clearly have not memorized, or I would have known it was BG. And also, keeping in mind and maybe this is just an education piece for the board of when is it appropriate to put a specific policy in place for something versus say having it in the handbooks where the cell phone usage is now, right? So, why would what rises it to the level that we should have a district policy as opposed to how we're doing it today? And I'm not sure I have a good answer on that. So, but they could all be part and parcel of the same discussion, right? We could start with that, and then with that information, we could say, okay, based on that, are there policies we think we should consider? Is your thought around which ones to review that we already have, or is it around do we want new policies?
I think yeah, point totally taken. I think my thought is sort of a little higher level, which is the board has concerns, the board members have things that are on their mind, and there might be just a moment where we say, as has happened this last week, where 2 different board members have emailed in to say, do we have a policy on this? I'm sure there are other folks that have questions about which policies are covered. And so again, just a moment, maybe it's more of a moment in time where we say, all right, every May, board members should email those questions about, do we have a policy to to the policy committee chair or to Cynthia, and then we discuss it at our last meeting of the year. And then and then we can bring any of those thoughts to the board. But it's just some mechanism to say like, because I just really would hate for those questions or those concerns to get lost and then to not be returned to. I think is more my concern. My wife is calling me, I think, about the backpack that I have in my car.
Tell her you're in the cafeteria.
I'm just gonna answer it. No, I'm not.
Yeah, no, I think, I guess I always kind of fall back to the policy committee to bring forward like recommendations on things for consideration, maybe. If I think you guys are obviously closer to the policies we do have, and like the email about the AI one, like I would imagine one of the policies we already have over like data security or student safety probably cover something like that, but you guys would know better than I would. That idea of, if you have a question about a policy, like A, do we have one? B, should we have one? I like that idea of maybe that flowing through the policy committee. And then when you guys can say, okay, these are the things we've heard about. And you guys would also be better prepared to say like, this might be a sample that MSMA has about this kind of policy. Do we want to consider it? And then as a board, then we can say, yep, that seems like a good use of your time. Please move forward with that, or you probably don't need it at this point. More.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess in these two instances, for these particular circumstances or potential types of policies or whatever things that policies could address, they seem potentially tied to student well-being. And for something like a cell phone policy, I guess I'd be concerned. I guess I would think it would be better to implement it at the beginning of a school year. And so I just am thinking, is that something, if we did consider, would we want to implement that mid-school year? And instead of talking about it at the retreat in August, is it appropriate to task the policy committee, say, with that, or Jean or administrators to explore that further, to say, is that something we should consider that would be implemented at the beginning of the school year, not in the middle, potentially?
I mean, just very technically, we just couldn't do that from a process point of view because it has to go through first read and then second read. And so there would be, so we just, even if we did know, even if we had a sample in hand in August that we knew we wanted to work with, we'd have to go through at least I think it would probably be a 2-month process at minimum before we would do that. And then that would be, unless there would be some sort of caveat, I would assume it would be then as soon as it's passed, it is policy. So I think point taken. I think that's a good question of like, if we start looking at a policy or if the question's asked of how do we want to look at one, what would the impact of implementing that at a particular time be? Yeah, I think that's a really good point, but we just have to go through the same process for each one.
And I guess my thought on that one would be, I would look to Jean and the admin team. I know that is on their, it's something they're going to be talking about. So for me, the implications, how it would come to pass, or if it should come to pass in what form, I think would be driven, personally, I feel like through the administrative team that's in the schools every day. But it sounds like that work is on their plate. So I would suggest we let them do that and then report back to us with their thoughts, suggestions, and then we can make our own moves if we so choose. All right. Any other? I'm looking at Colin because he might have had one he was going to. Nope, you're good. Okay. All right. Any other board comments, committee reports? Nope. Okay. So we will move on to the finance committee.
All right. God bless you. So we met today, but I'm not reporting on that meeting, but we met, this is from our March 27th meeting, which basically we were still just finalizing the annual budget documents and getting them to the attorney, which obviously they were approved because we all signed them at the April 10th meeting. Then just finishing up the audit. And so that's, I will just say that has been accepted. And so we are all good with the audit. So everything rest easy tonight. Um, and yeah, and that's about it. So I'll take questions if anybody has them.
Thank you, Beth. All right. So next is Facilities and Operations Committee. Kelly.
So at the Facilities and Operations Committee on the 10th of April, we spent some time looking at the energy audit that was done by energy management consultants. And we particularly looked at the phase 1 projects that they outlined for us. That audit revealed some pretty high priorities that we weren't necessarily aware of prior to that. And that's going to affect how we shift what we put into our FY25 capital improvement plan. For example, the boiler at Pownell was shown to be really in dire need of replacement. So that's definitely rising to the top. We weren't quite aware of that before. Also, some security systems we feel are really important. We're going to be prioritizing those. So those priorities are still being discussed. And in light of the information that we still need to gather from the financial point of view, as well as the actual prioritization in the capital improvement plan, we decided it was not going to be feasible for us to start implementing the phase 1 projects this year. Secondly, Glenn did say that in light of the fact that we won't be starting right away, he will be looking into whether the rebates from Efficiency Maine will still be available to us if we do start the projects, for example, the replacement of lighting with LEDs, if we start that in fiscal year 25. The next thing we talked about was the major capital school construction funding, and Glenn pointed out that if we were to apply for this, it would require a facility study and an enrollment study, which would cost us a minimum of $60,000. And we really didn't have enough high enough priorities to expend that amount of money to apply for the funding. So that is off the table at this point.
Questions for Kelly? Maura.
I guess this isn't really a question for Kelly specifically, but I'm wondering about the enrollment studies. I know it's come up before with the past one that we did, and if we're thinking about doing any again at some point.
I don't know if that has been discussed. I personally have a lack of reliance on any of the enrollment studies we've been provided over the years. It's not a super costly process, but I'm not sure it's given us data that's helped us really make any decisions. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I imagine enrollment will be some part of the strategic plan that's coming up in the next year or two also. Obviously, that's a key part of when you're looking at all the pieces of your district and your strategic plan moving forward is your facilities, which is driven by enrollment. So I imagine a part of that will get picked up in that process, but I guess you're nodding. So yeah. Other questions?
Just quick question on the. It seems it's great that we're looking at the energy audit and the recommendations there to inform the FY25 improvement plan. I'm curious. I guess that just sort of like the flashbulb for me on that is like, how else are we getting information sort of like going forward? Because we're not going to have the energy audit every year, I would assume. So like, how are we going to regularly, other than Glenn and Jean kind of generally having a sense of things, like what mechanisms are there in place to sort of evaluate our needs for facilities and operations each year?
I'm going to let Jean take it, but I will say that this energy audit did cover priorities that would take us many years to implement. It was not something that we would just do over a period of 1 year and be done. This is, the things that we need to do imminently, and then things that we can put off for a little while. Nothing's going to burn down if we don't do them this year. So this is something that will be informing our capital facilities plan for years to come.
Cool. So it seems like maybe just in that is also it may be more of like a 6 or 7 year. We'd need to make sure that we have an energy audit or something like it to kind of help inform that process. Like that it's not every year, but it's like there's going to be some sort of regular.
Right, periodically, but definitely not every year or even every 5 years.
All right. Any other questions or comments on that one? So we will move to strategic communications. Is that you, Kara?
I guess so. So we met a couple of times since our last report, and we focused on the parent satisfaction survey and analyzed those results. And we will have an executive summary available for the board to review for the May 8th meeting. And because we were able to complete that, we will not be meeting in May. We did talk about looking ahead to next year and how we will be playing a big role in the strategic planning process. So we're looking forward to that.
Thank you. Questions for Kara? Great. Thank you. And policy, Colin.
Yeah, so we met as a committee on Zoom on April 5th. Just a reminder, if anyone ever wants to join us from the public for those meetings, they are welcome to join us. And the public cannot participate in the meeting, but they can observe and know everything that we are doing in those meetings. On April 5th, we took a look at EEA, Student Transportation Services, as well as EEA, Student Transportation Employee Requirements, Training and Responsibilities, and GBEC, Drug-Free Workplace Policy. Those latter two, we are going to be looking at again in May after we do some have some discussion and get some information from the administration and from our legal counsel. But we did have a good thorough discussion of EEA, Student Transportation Services, and that is the policy we have to discuss with you tonight for first read, as well as some second read policies where we made the minor adjustments that were recommended at the last meeting. But we did not talk about those as a policy committee at the April 5th meeting. Questions about that before we do the other thing?
Do the other thing. Okay, so before you hop into your policy first and second read, I'm just going to share with our new board member how policies are approved. So the policy committee either writes one, reviews one, updates one. And they bring it to us in a red line or I guess it's not really red line, but red line version. So you can see the changes. And our policy around adopting policies is that they must go through 2 reads. So you'll see tonight we have one that's for first read. So really that's around discussion, and they explain sort of the recommended changes, whether it was a law, whether it was, experience, why we're doing it. And so we'll vote on that and send the policy committee back either with like, yep, looks good, or you might want to look at these considered changes. And then it comes back for second read at usually 2 meetings out. And then once it's voted and approved at second read, it is officially policy of the district. So there's a 2 read. That's why we have some for first and some for second read tonight. So do I have a motion for consideration and approval for the first read of the following policy, EEA, Student Transportation Services? Beth and Carolyn, thank you.
Okay, so tonight the policy committee brings before you EEA, Student Transportation Services. This policy we are reviewing as part of our the collection that we just are on a cycle. So this was last looked at in 2017, and so it was due for a revisit. So we were looking at it. There are a few changes that we make sort of regularly having to do with pronouns. And there is a sort of one underlined substantive change that came from the recommendation coming from the administration, which is the underlined RSU number 5 buses do not travel down private ways or roads. So that is the only substantive change that we are bringing forward. Just I guess at a higher level, again, this covers our practices around student transportation services, and this is where we do in policy make clear that that the 1 mile limit and then the caveats around that. So I think maybe if we have any sort of general questions about that, and then Jeremy was kind enough to come tonight, and so there might be some questions that he might be better placed to add, but also just some comments, anything that would be helpful from your perspective for us to know. So any questions generally?
So the addition of the private road or way, I believe that has been sort of the practice, but it just wasn't part of the policy previously. Okay, that makes sense. And I'm going to assume that's for liability reasons. Not why are we clarifying it, but why has it been the practice that we don't go down private roads and ways?
There's multiple reasons. Usually private roads are not maintained by municipalities. Turnarounds at the end of it, they're not held to the town spec road. That roads are turnarounds, maintenance. We don't have the public works to rely on keeping it plowed, sanded for safe travel.
Makes sense. Thank you. I guess my other question was the practice that the pickup is at the end of the road, right? Is that laid out in here? I know historically, if you have a kindergartner or a pre-K, or they pick you up at your house, assuming there's a safe turnaround. But if they don't, it's at the end of the road.
At the end of the private road, yes.
But even a public road,
A public road, we
like
go in.
a dead end.
Oh, no, that's a different story, right?
So it's
Turn
a
around at the
public
end.
road, but
Right.
but dead ends, right? So those ones are picked up at the end of the road, sort of.
Correct.
Okay. Because I believe that's also the practice, but I don't know if for clarity if that's in here anywhere or not.
It doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, that's a good call. We did not discuss that. I would be curious, Jeremy, for your thought. Would that be helpful to have as just a that? Again, this is sort of where in the policy, how detailed do we get?
It would probably be good to have it defined in there.
Defined as to
Dead end road.
which roads
Yep.
can be accessible, and is that mostly in terms of turnaround?
It is turnaround.
Well, yeah, I mean, so for instance, my road, I live on a dead end road. There's 13 houses on the road. We have luckily generally had a kindergartner or pre-K every year, so the bus would always come down. This was until COVID, but so otherwise the kids would have to walk a half mile to the end of the road. So it's just based on whether there's a kindergartner or not. So if there's a kindergartner, they stop at everybody's house. If there isn't, they pick you up at the end of the road. And I think, so it's just based, I guess, on the age of the kids. So once they're first graders, they're expected to get to the end of the road. And I don't know if that's the same.
Yeah, I mean, we do have the clause providing a suitable. This is for the under B, pre-kindergarten and kindergarten students, providing a suitable bus turn is available. So that is there for that. So that caveat is there. I guess I just do wonder whether there's any. I guess to Jean's point about the sort of general kind of evaluation of this service, is there anything that we want to tee up for ourselves to sort of say, all right, like, do we? I mean, I at a sort of principled level, I would see no reason to alter B, but from a logistical point of view, in terms of like the number of routes and all of that. If that didn't exist, I would be curious what the impact of that would be. In other words, if we didn't go to every kindergarten or pre-K house, would that create any more flexibility? Again, just purely logistically, would that create any greater ability for us to create routes that are more efficient?
The only feedback I would have, if we even took the kindergartner children, that take them out of that pot, even if I'm going down a road I have a kindergarten at the tail end. Every time a bus driver stops, that adds on to the total route time. And we have fewer drivers, and that same driver might have to pick up additional streets, roads. Then if they just have the kindergarten at the end and one other stop or wherever that is, that's going to save us time, because that takes time to stop, lights, park, load every time we stop. So, it could potentially.
Yeah, and I know we try to keep these kind of as general yet specific enough to our needs to be flexible, so you can make those decisions. And I think this probably is pretty general in that sense. But that's a good point, that even if you pick up the kindergartners or the pre-Kers, but pick up everybody else on my street, the other 17 kids in one spot instead of their 12 houses, it's certainly probably more efficient in time. But I think this allows for that. I was just curious if we wanted to lay out that, like, if you're not a kindergartner, you're expected to go to on the dead end road. You're expected to kind of, and maybe it does. Maybe the authorized bus stops will be located as to load and unload with the most safety allowed for road. I don't know if that really reaches it, but I was just curious. Laura.
Yeah, I'm wondering, to Jean's point about the efficiency of the route, if there should also be something about limiting the length of the route as part of this somewhere in here, because I know safety is the most important thing, right? But if we want to do the safest thing, we would drive everybody to the end of their driveway. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to consider safety plus the most efficient route. So I don't know, maybe that's captured in here already, but I'm not.
I mean, I think the way it's written provides them the flexibility to decide, right? I don't think it's requiring, other than the kindergarten, like we specifically say, if you have a kindergartner, we will drop them off at the end of it, or pre-K, or we'll drop them off at the end of the driveway, assuming there's a suitable turnaround. Otherwise, we're going to do it in the most efficient, safe way possible, right? Is that the goal?
That is definitely the goal. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to highlight that authorized bus stops will be located as to load and unload students with the most safety allowed by road conditions. We might want to add something to that sentence, just referring to the efficiency or the availability of bus drivers, or just further define what an authorized bus stop is. Just break it up into 2 bullets potentially.
Right. Because, I mean, technically, will be located for the most allowed, but I mean, that would be the end of everybody's driveway, to Mark's point.
Yeah, I wonder whether there's, we could take this back and look at it, and part of it we could look at whether there's a place where we sort of at more of a top level, we sort of talk about the creation of the routes and how the creation of the routes are at the for the director of transportation to create with certain considerations in mind. So it's sort of it's not then kind of seeming like it's a case by case basis, or it's about a kindergarten student or not a kindergarten student, but it's sort of like these routes are created to maximize efficiency and safety. Then there are these other more minute things, but it just at more of a higher level. Whether that just gives us a little bit more room to, if we have to make some of those hard decisions, to just be very clear that like it's a director of transportation, obviously in conversation with the superintendent, but would something like that, if we kind of played around with that language, talking to Jean and Jeremy, would that be something the board would be open to?
I think so.
Would it make anybody angry? Cheyenne, if it makes you angry, you can say this is a safe place. Okay.
She's like, if I said every time Colin made me angry.
I get a little notice on my phone, actually. Other questions, or Jeremy, do you any other thoughts just about the policy as it exists right now, in terms of its practicality? Generally, is it helpful and useful
It is,
to you?
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I haven't really picked up on any highlights that I think we should change. No.
Okay, cool.
I'm just wondering if you have an estimate as to how many students live within a mile who might be affected going forward.
We've talked to that, but that's a really tough thing to do with our rural demographics as far as Freeport. Yeah, you could probably do that. Durham, I mean, spread out. Pownell, even worse. And then, as Gene talked about, sidewalks and lights, and we haven't done that yet as far as drawing a circle around the building and
But there's an idea that that would help with efficiency, that there would be a
Definitely.
significant help in the efficiency of the roads.
I would say even anecdotally, when I'm driving by in certain spots that I know are definitely within a safe walking distance and with high school kids. For sure. I'm just saying that, I can walk that distance. So in safety, safety is certainly, and to Jeremy's point as well, it makes a big difference certainly in Durham and Pelham, because we're not going to have someone schlepping down 136.
Route 9, 136, yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's probably around here that it's more of an issue because, for the safety purposes, just the dip in the road right before you get to the school, I wouldn't feel comfortable with my kids walking that, and I live a quarter of a mile away.
Right.
They go through the woods, which I don't know if that's safe or not.
And one other thing that's, I think, important that Jeremy hasn't mentioned that's important for the board to know when you talk about those safety issues, it does come to our attention. We've had a couple that, and Jeremy and I also take me out there. Let's go for a ride, Jeremy.
I was
And
gonna
like,
bring
this
that
is
up,
where does
but-
the bus stop? What can I see? Let's go back and turn the other way. So we do, he does it first, and then sometimes he asks me, and we've done some drive.
We've done it
Right,
together
that's-
and went back and sat a distance and made sure it was a good sight line coming both ways, safe. Cars can see the bus, the right height, lights. We took that all into consideration.
I can help your study of Durham. There's no lights.
Yeah.
Check. Mark it off your list. There's one blinking light in town. All right. Any other comments, questions, suggestions on this policy?
So I guess just on that question around the kind of mile, it seems like that's not a policy, that's a more of a procedure or kind of a practice in terms of how that is how it's actually executed and how it is evaluated by Jeremy and by the superintendent. Is that a fair statement? Is there anything more that we should be adding here in terms of saying that? I guess I'm just wondering at a certain point if we had to be really strict on it, right? If we had to be super strict on just for the logistics of number of bus drivers, if we just had within a mile, and if we look at health, and we maybe even evaluate the pre-K and kindergarten, and we take into consideration hazardous walking conditions. I don't know. Is there any? Do we have enough space? Do we have enough room to do what we need to do, or is there something we need to add to this to make that happen?
I'm not sure if there's anything you need to add to it to do what you need to do. I'm just going to throw it out there because not that I think we should do this, but is it something that we do want to? It says we will provide transportation to all students living beyond a mile. My understanding is the state does not require transportation for high school students. I don't know if that saves you a bunch because you're going to pick up the middle schoolers in Freeport anyway, or
Covering
in
the route,
Pownell. So
right.
maybe it's a moot point because they're doing those routes anyway. And I think there's only 1 or 2 buses for Durham for the high school. Just in the spirit of all possibilities, is that something that we wanted to consider or have considered ever?
I don't believe it's ever been considered. No.
And I'm not advocating for it. I just, it's an option open to us if we wanted to go down that route or not go down that route, as the case may be.
It seems like if that's a really interesting thought, though. I wonder whether that would be the sort of thing where if we were to alter B, it can be fun. It would amuse me to put high schoolers, pre-K, and kindergarten all together in one line. But just more that more to the point of saying for those situations, for different reasons, it would be at the discretion of the director of transportation to determine if there are buses available to pick those up. High school for the legal reasons, and then pre-K for I guess the bus turnaround.
If I can give my 2 cents on that, do you have to know? I worry terribly about children high school students that will not get to school if we don't pick them up. And I look at it equity. I look at it from sort of the equity lens. Do we have to? No. Should we? I think educationally, we should.
And they are a combination run. It's a high school, middle school run. So
It really doesn't save us much to even consider
No.
it. I agree completely. I just throwing it out there. All ideas are not good ideas, but they're ideas.
All ideas are ideas. So just what I have heard is that the policy committee is being asked to go back and look at whether we rejig some language around the creation of the director of transportation creating routes with in consultation with superintendent with considerations of health, safety, and efficiency as a kind of more kind of blanket direction. Is that accurate? Does that reflect the board's interest, Kara?
That sounds great. I have another question though about the hazardous road conditions and how that is determined. I think parents are going to want to know how that is determined if their kids won't be able to get a ride to and from school in that mile. If I would hope that they would agree with the assessment, but I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit more about what that assessment looks like. I know you just, talked a bit about visibility when you would go around, but what would that look like for the greater than normal or average danger?
Sidewalks, lit, shouldering, road conditions. There's multiple things in there that would make it hazardous road conditions. Traffic, amount of traffic.
Because it's an interesting one around the mile, because I know maybe it's because it's a little more rural out here. It's not as common, but I know in other places, like they put a mile box around the school, and regardless of, as long as there's sidewalks, you're walking. And in some places, it's more than a mile. I have a friend whose elementary school is a mile and the high school is a mile and a half. Talk about it. You could walk that, right? Like, they got to go a mile and a half to get to school, and there's no buses.
Obviously, if you're talking like Moore Street, Mass Landing, you got hazardous walking conditions. Holbrook Street isn't 136 or Route 9. So there's a big difference here.
That answer your question? Yeah. All right. So you have what you need, Colin?
I believe so, unless there's anything that anyone did not feel heard on. Cheyenne, you're good?
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. We've had our discussion. So all those in favor of the first read? Great, none opposed. All right, so yes, thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, so for second read, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of second read for the following policies? DJ, bidding, purchasing requirements. DJH, purchasing and contracting, procurement, staff code of conduct. JHB, truancy. And IMG, animals in school. Maura, thank you. Kelly. I'm staring right at you, so just make your motion.
So yes, the policy committee brings these four policies to you for second read. Just as a just general practice. Actually, can I do a quick thing? Because I forgot to say it earlier, because it's kind of relevant, is that we just were having conversations with the policy committee, just how important it is for us to really make sure that we're understanding the board's concerns. And just to remind everyone that as just a general practice, when you get your packet, please read through the policies for whether it's first or second read. And if you have any questions, email those to us ahead of time. We're happy to talk about things, obviously, like now if we haven't heard from you, but just as a matter, of course, that gives us more time to also then talk to Cynthia and Jean and anyone else that's relevant to that. So just, does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yes, and I'll use that as a opportunity to remind folks that if you have questions on anything in your board packet that you have, so generally it gets emailed out on Thursday, it arrives in people's homes probably Friday or Saturday, but everybody has it in their inbox by Thursday morning. If you have questions, other than sort of minor ones that you feel like you could ask in the meeting without a lot of substantive research to be done, we ask that you send those either to the committee chair that your question is for, or Jean and myself by end of day Monday. So that gives everybody kind of Tuesday and Wednesday to try and gather either information or answers or whatever the case may be to come prepared to address that at the board meeting.
Super. Yeah. These are for second read. So in general, these would be policies that we feel we've looked at once. We took any feedback on and made adjustments. I think any adjustments for these were minor and kind of line level adjustments. There was not feedback that we received that was sort of any sort of reconsideration of anything. But this is the time when if you have any other questions, if there are things that you think we have not addressed, now would be the time. And I'll just say that just for generally, if there's any of these that we should talk about, speak now.
So were there any changes? I
Just-
did not like compare them word for word, but I was hoping you could just highlight if there are any changes.
I cannot go through and highlight the minutia, the minute changes. They will be at the level of like individual words or
Okay,
individual.
so
It's
no
like there was
significant-
there was nothing substantive that came
Okay.
from. Not that we take everything you say very seriously. It's all substantive, but just it wasn't anything that you were asking us to change that was about like a rule or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
So like, I think A was Maine law, right? And then B is federal law. Like we had them make, to have them be consistent in the titling. I recall that one. And I think, the B's and C's and the twos got moved around. And that's the case for all of these, right?
I do know. I just not to put Kara on the spot, but Kara, you did have a question
On your own policy?
on your own on the policy that you chose
Yeah.
and wanted to discuss.
I think truancy, is that what I brought up? Right. Was asking Cynthia earlier about just that, but I wasn't going to. I didn't feel like I needed to bring it up again. I felt confident, but it's worth saying that last meeting, I think Jean was speaking about how truancy students can go in and out of truancy, and the policy doesn't really refer to that. And I think Cynthia was saying that it is case by case, and it's so fluid. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else feels that this is something that should be spelled out more in this policy. How that process, how someone can go in truancy and out of truancy in the school year.
Just to remind me, and I'm going to say everyone else just to make me feel better about it. Is there anything that is directly linked to multiple, if you have multiple instances of truancy within the year, like if you have 2 instances of truancy, are you at risk of, detention, for an example? Or like, does the number of truancies matter for the year, or are we more focused on just the truancy case by case basis? If it happens to one kid 6 times, unfortunately, it happens to one kid 6 times. Is that? Okay, sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. When everyone's
That's a very good question, and either Cynthia needs to stand up or Jean can answer that, but this committee chair will not answer that question.
I'll take it. And I think what's super important that it isn't, there's a case by case basis, and it's clearly articulated what the process is. And there are children that get to the point where, the principals, the teams at the school, they're putting a plan together on how to improve that, and things, it's not working. So then there's a process where there are times when it rises to my attention where I need to have the family come in. So the family comes in with the principal, and we have a conversation, and we make a plan, and then it's followed up on like this has to improve. And even, in your own policy, if things don't improve, then that's when we refer it to the district attorney. So our goal is to get the student back in school. Our goal is to figure out why the kid is not coming to school and to put those supports in place. And then we talk about like, what is the school going to do? Whether, sometimes there are check-ins and all kinds of things. And what is the parent going to do? For example, I'm going to make it a non-negotiable that my child comes to school. Those sort of things. So it's carefully tracked at the school level, and they really do a good job, working to try to get those kids back in school. But there is a point where it's not necessarily a magic number, but when we're really seeing that pattern, and sometimes it's we're seeing it this year, but we've also seen it last year. So they're tracking that data as well as like this has occurred 2 years in a row. So that has to rise to a bigger level.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I suppose, yeah, just I guess to give back to you what I heard on that was just that sort of truancy is more of a state of being. State of being, and such that it's not like a accumulation of demerits. It's not that if you are truant once, truant twice, truant 3 times, then it triggers a suspension or it triggers something like that. It's sort of a state, and when you are in that state, that has to correspond. An intervention plan is created to deal with that state of being / mind. And then depending on how that goes, you're either in or out. Would you say that's relatively accurate, Jean?
Well, the goal is that the kid is permanently out of a state of truancy and they're coming to school. That's the real, and we're watching, monitoring to see if it occurs again, for sure. And are there other supports we need to put in place?
But in terms of the process, it's basically if the truancy cannot be corrected, then the second trigger point is in E, is the written notice, all the various things that like the letter will be sent to the parents about the requirements of law, and that we will report to the state.
And we're tracking truancy. We have to report. We report, and those are just legal requirements that we have to report to the state truancy through our reporting system. But it's always a school. It's not necessary. Oh gosh, you were truant. You were a truancy once. We met and it didn't work. Okay, now we're going to refer you to the superintendent, and we'll do that step. Sometimes the school is really trying with the complexity. It depends on the complexity of the case. It takes much longer than that. That you have one truancy and second you're out. It's the process is usually much longer than.
And I wonder if part of the confusion around that whole is like the definition of what is truant, right? It says like a specific number of days in a given year, right? So I guess I figure if you have 10 days in the specific year, you're truant for the year, right? Because it's in that year. I mean, is that so? How do you get out of truancy until the next school year when your ticker restarts, right?
And I think the bigger thing is for us to remember is like, what are we doing with that family, with that child to ensure the kid is getting to school? That's the bigger piece of that. The reporting mechanism, yes, we're reporting it to the state. They have numbers and so forth on how many kids is truant. But I think the bigger thing is what are we doing with specific students to improve that attendance?
Now, this may have been touched upon, but just for my refresher, each school is different, obviously. So is it a standard that it's the principal that goes out, for each truant child, or is it dependent on each school? So for instance, with Will, is it the guidance counselor whose job it is, or is there one set person per school, or is it just dependent on whoever, kind of is available at the time?
So who's the attendance coordinator? Is that it's the principals?
Every school has a team. There's a team that is involved.
Will
Oh,
is
sorry.
dying to get up.
Will,
See what
do you
happens,
want-
Kate,
you
when
wanna
you take
pop
his
up?
spot?
Will,
He's just
please.
dying
do it,
to
Will.
talk.
This is your time to shine.
You didn't get to
This is
report,
it.
so come on up, Will.
You have 18 seconds.
And your walking counts.
We have an attendance coordinator, but it's not always the principal. So in our school, it's actually the guidance counselor, and I think at the high school they have different roles. A piece that's not part of this policy, but just so you're aware, the truancy side of things is actually not the most complex for us in many ways. It's because for it to be truant, they have to be unexcused, which means that someone hasn't called in. We're not aware of why they're absent. So the assumption is they're truant. Chronic absenteeism is a big issue that we're always dealing with. And that might be someone who's called in every time, they're not well, or we're going on a family trip. And so we actually have permission slips for family trips that we require. And then we will say whether it's excused or unexcused. And we define that by the number of days they've already missed. So if somebody's already had a number of excused absences, now they're requesting 10 days excused to go to Florida, we're going to mark that as unexcused. Now, the family may take the trip and it may trigger the person into truancy, but that's that piece really. It was that question of trying to collaborate with the family as to the importance of being in school consistently and regularly. And are there factors that are prohibiting that or making that a challenge for that student or that family? So it's, whilst you're reading about the truancy piece, I would say to you that the bulk of our work on absenteeism is on excused absences and chronic absenteeism when that occurs, if that makes sense.
So can I just ask a question around in the definition for truancy in C with basically the referral to DHHS? So that's truancy. They're reported to DHHS as child abuse or neglect. But you could call your kid in every day as sick, and that would not be reported to DHHS?
No, it potentially could be. So
Okay.
neglect is neglect, and when it comes down as mandated reporters, we have to make a determination on what we feel is neglect or negatively impacting a child, and then the department would make that determination whether they want to pursue it in that way. So if there's not a magic number of unexcused absences that may trigger that, I think as Jean has alluded to, a lot of this is individualized with families, looking at patterns or experiences over time, and when a child is in school for multiple years, you're aware of that actually, attendance has been pretty good. This has been a rough year. So there's a different kind of pattern. Like this is a continuation of a multi-year pattern that we've tried these things. We have to continue to sort of stress the importance of that. And we very much try to do that at as early a grade level as possible to support families in understanding the impact and importance of it.
Just what Will said about, the principal sort of making the decision whether it's excused or unexcused. Is there a uniform way that's enforced across the district? So like if my kid comes to Durham school and I call up and say, we're taking a trip, and you say, I'm sorry, that's not excused, but somebody could do it in Mass Landing and then they're excused. Like, is there any sort of like, whatever, I don't know, consistency around that or guidelines that you all use?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that accurately. We've definitely all used the same paperwork. We have definitely collaborated and we discussed the impact of this work. We often will brainstorm with each other strategies like, hey, I've got this particular challenge that we're trying to work through. The part of that is if someone takes a trip, I think, Michelle, you were just alluding to like, if you, early in the year, where does that go, right? So we look at it as 10% or 10 days. And if they have early in the year, it's unlikely they've had winter colds and flu and every other health issue. So that family trip is most likely excused. Get to this time of year, if taking a family trip and you've had a rough year of ear infections and everything else, then it may be unexcused. But remembering in that perspective, it really is just trying to communicate this one thing all the time, which is regular attendance is really important and impactful to every learner, and just reinforcing that with a family. And, so that's really the theme. And then are there ways in which we, if they're struggling with that or their child is struggling with that, are there ways in which we can help change that understanding or impact that attendance? That really is what it's leading towards.
Just to follow up. Oh, sorry.
At this point, I'm using Colin's time, just so you know. Which he was.
My time is infinite.
Okay.
Takes all of Cheyenne's time.
Oh, you're
it's
good.
fine.
Okay.
There's an equation we actually have. It's
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
All right. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be for Will, but it's just a question of like, if for some reason, like say I had this trip planned late in the year and then I call the school and they say it's not excused, would you let the parent know like, okay, if you decide to take this trip, then we are going to report you to DHS?
Well, again, in that circumstance, it wouldn't, I think, I know it sounds so vague, Beth, I don't mean it sounds so vague. There would have been conversations about that prior to that place. So I think that if it was going to trigger, it was going to reach that level, it would not be as a surprise. So I think there would have been significant enough impact. And we do put in writing, and parents are really good about requesting. And we have a standard letter that we put back and explain, this will actually put you over that amount if there are aspects of school, the importance. So we'll re-message it. But no, it wouldn't be sort of like, there's not a trigger point like that's going to happen to that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very
And
much.
because also, if
Because
you
I
think
think
about
actually it could, because if you
I
read
know,
it,
that's
5 consecutive
No,
days
but-
of unexcused.
But again, remember it's a two-step process. So that the first thing that would be triggered is number 3, is truancy procedures, right? As required by law, the following procedures shall be followed when a student is truant. The principal, upon determining the student is truant under section 1, will notify the superintendent of the student's truancy. So that triggers that a plan needs to be developed. So that would be the thing that would be most immediately triggered, I think, in the situation of what you're talking about. So I think technically, the way I would interpret that is basically you'd be saying to the parents, if you go, your child will be considered truant, and we will need to create a truancy plan to deal with the impact of that absence on their academics. Then if I think then on the success of that plan, right? That's the way it should work. It's like if then the parents do comply with that, right? Sort of say like, yes, we're going to create a plan, and like everybody works together and you work on that, then it doesn't get reported. Is my understanding of the process.
Okay, because
It's
the way it
really not
reads-
clear. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say truancy under this paragraph is considered child abuse and neglect, and under Maine law, and is reportable to DHHS when the truancy is the result of neglect by a person responsible for the child.
I think it's the
Reportable. It does
not
not
that it's
mean and
reported.
shall be reported. So there's an equity aspect to this also, just to put out that. So it's more expensive to generally get flights or accommodation and travel during school breaks from the Northeast. So February and April break. So there may be a family for whom their only opportunity to go on a trip out of state or to somewhere warm is to go at a time where it's not so expensive. And so, when I say to you, those are aspects we work through with the family, or it may be that there's, a family event or an aging grandparent who got sick and now the family is going. So there are specifics that aren't necessarily just forget school, we're on our way. And I think, we also have close enough connections with all families to know, what that investment is in school. It's really just to make sure that a child isn't experiencing neglect from a circumstance by which the adult guardians of that child aren't valuing education and aren't following through on their sort of like side of the equation.
Yeah, and I think my understanding, Beth, is if I'm interpreting your concerns correctly, is sort of is a situation where the parent would, through non-neglectful reasons, be reported. And it seems that, again, I think that the way Will broke it down, I think really helps. But I think it is in the language where it's like in that C, is reportable to the Department of Health and Human Services when the truancy is the result of neglect. So I think it is actually built in there. So I think that then the rest of our policy, I think, flows. And I think that was really helpful to have that clarification, because I think actually that, if Cynthia was here, but I think I would, yeah, run away. When I see Cynthia next, I will say to Cynthia that I think we should perhaps look at when the last time JEA, which is compulsory attendance, was looked at as a policy, and when that's up for review next. And if it's in the next couple of years, maybe we just bump that we look at that as a policy committee next year, because I think a lot of what is not directly is intersecting truancy is these questions of absenteeism, and we know that that's a national problem, and that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that. But I think that we did not look at that policy, and I would be curious what we would discover if we would look at that. But so did we address everyone's concerns around the truancy?
Okay.
to clarify, a student is out of truancy if they've come to school for 1 day. Is that right?
So I think
Like, I mean, I don't know if we need to spell it out in here, but I'm just curious about what defines the out of truancy, and if they miss, and do they go back in if they
Miss another day.
then
Yeah, it's
meet
less
A,
of
B, or
in,
C?
I would say it's less of in today, out tomorrow, but it's like they're showing it, they're coming to school. They're not truant, but then there's a trigger because now we see they're out again and they're out again and they're out again. So it's all about the plan the school is going to make. And I think so it is more, and to Will's point, Will is absolutely correct. The bigger issue we have is chronic absenteeism. And this policy is really about the law, what we have to do by law, what we have to report to the state. And the biggest thing that we need to look at is, in general, those chronic absenteeism for that. And parents are very aware. It's not a surprise. The teams at each school, they are in constant contact with these families. They're following up on whether they're at school or not.
I guess just to follow, I guess maybe on that's super helpful, that clarification, Jean. I guess maybe as I'm hearing Kara's question, it's sort of maybe it seems that like truancy seems to be as a state, right? That it's not a desirable state, right? We don't like and that there are like perhaps consequences from it, but it doesn't seem that there actually are any consequences academically for the student to be if they're directly, right? Did you put the horse in there? Okay. So I think it's just that, I think because once a student, if let's say the student is Kara, Kara is truant, and we say, Kara, we need to make a plan, and so a team is gathered to work with Kara on that. Like as far as our reporting goes, in terms of our reporting for the year, Kara has been counted as truant. That will never go away. As like we're not going to subtract it. Like it'll never go back to zero because Kara was truant at that point. But if we have that plan in place and Kara works with her family to bring her back into alignment, she will then be sort of out of truancy. But the first thing kind of never went away. Is that fair?
And it's quarterly reporting as well. So that's on that report that we certify for the state, that you are
so if you're truant,
you're a truant served. But in terms of when you're talking about, are there kids that they're not in this, are they coming, the goal is coming to school. You are truant, you're coming to school, and we're watching the pot, we have a plan in place. And then, there are things that are trigger other actions by the school is what I would say. That's when we're talking, like there are times they're coming to school, but then we see this again, they're not coming again. So then that's going to trigger other meetings from the school, other conversations from the team, from whether it's a student assistance team or whatever that mechanism is at the individual school.
So if Kara's truant in Q1, she will be listed on every report as truant for the rest of the year, for the rest of that year. Even if she and her family have worked hard and have figured out that situation, she just technically is reported.
Yeah, I think the confusion is really around sort of the reporting piece and then sort of the actual implications of how we're going to deal with it, right? So when we say they're in and they're out, that's not, from a reporting piece, that's not the case. Once you hit that, however many days, 7 or 5 consecutively, you are truant for that school year. Now, what that triggers may change over time based on whether you stay in school or you continue to not come to school. But I think and maybe this isn't true for Kara, but for me, that was the confusion. We're like, well, how can you be in and out? Like you're in or you're out, right? You're kind of dead or, there's no kind of
That's
dead.
absolutely correct. So there's a reporting, sorry, you kind of, the reporting
was gonna
piece for
say
the
pregnant,
state
but-
is separate from what's happening where we're talking, like kids are,
Right.
they exactly as Will
So
described.
you guys are focusing
right.
on like what happens
plan.
from this policy? Like why do we have it? Because it triggers all of these supports. Where I'm thinking of like, are they truant on the report or are they not? And once they are for the full year. Okay.
But that's super helpful, and I'm glad we had this conversation. But it's not as though again there's anything where like they're given a dunce cap to wear around for like the rest of the year. No, but my point being that like it's not that there's anything actively that is bad if you are in the fourth quarter listed as truant and you've been on your plan. It's not that like that's seen as a negative. That's seen like that is looked at either by the administrators or by the teachers or any. It's just a very technical. It's just a technical designation.
Kelly? No.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this truancy policy defines what truancy is and that it triggers a support plan, but it doesn't necessarily spell out what that support plan looks like and what would happen if they don't follow the support plan. And I guess that's, I think, a point that we need to remember, that this is not the support plan to get people in or out of truancy.
I think it is because that's under, if I'm understanding correctly, that's under 3C is the intervention plan, and then that's the plan that is developed, and that's the plan that.
But not the details is what I'm trying to say. These are
Right.
the sort support pieces.
Right. It's just potential aspects of the plan. Stacy.
Hi, yes. Just speaking as a mom of a child who is in Freeport who has been, well, she wasn't marked as truant, but she did have lots of absences due to various mental health reasons and whatnot. Communication is the key. And there's no mark, there's no nothing. It is just communication, working with the guidance counselors, working with all of her teachers, working with everybody. And they have been nothing but absolutely phenomenal in helping her develop a plan that keeps her engaged in wanting to go to school and not making her feel less than when she cannot get to school. So it's definitely, it's just communication and working together, and yeah, it all comes together. So
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Laura.
I had a hopefully quick question. Is the school resource officer in the section about law enforcement involved in this at all, or is that?
It depends. It really depends. Again, it's really student specific. It could be.
So when it's reported to local law enforcement, it could potentially involve the school resource officer.
It could.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know about our SRO, but I know when I was in high school, our SRO used to go downtown and look for people who are just skipping school and bring them back. So I don't know if Officer Marshall does that. I mean, I just saw them bring people into the school.
Yeah, that's a very detailed explanation for someone who was not there downtown.
Yes, exactly. We didn't have open campus. That wasn't a thing. Okay. So do we feel okay on the, see, Kara almost didn't even ask that question. Imagine that. See how we fill our time when we have a short agenda? Okay. So my only comment on animals in schools, I do love this policy, by the way, is I'm not sure why the font is so small. I'm just for consistency, like, I mean, I have pretty good eyes, and this is pretty small font. So
No, that's not by accident. We were doing that at you.
yeah.
It was directly.
And then my other favorite is the wild animals that appear on school grounds. My favorite picture on all things Durham ever is the guinea hens standing at the front door of the Durham Community School. There's like 4 of them lined up like they were trying to get in the school. I don't know if any kids went outside or if they were kept in the policy here. Yeah. So other comments, change. I don't think there were really any changes to the animal one, right? Yeah.
I feel silly bringing this up, but I did send a text message to Colin after the meeting asking him if red
The turtle?
Yeah. I was like, is it true that only the, now I lost where it was. Which paragraph is it? Only red-eared turtles, known as painted turtles, are carriers of salmonella, and that other turtles are not? Like, do we have turtles in the classroom that? Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yes. Yes, typically the red-eared ones, they're the ones that typically carry it. All exotics can be carrier of other kinds of zoonotic parasites. So, but yes.
Well, I'm just
No, but that's
I'm
true,
just
though.
really
So,
glad
like,
that
anything
Stacy
that's-
ran on that sort of turtle platform.
I'm a staunch turtle. Yeah.
'Cause that-
No. So like anything like that, any of the zoonotic ones can be transferred between animal to human and then from human to human. So just, you know.
So since we have you here as a board member and you're trapped and can't leave, are 3 years for 3 years, do you feel that that's okay to leave as is and kind of really pick on red-eared turtles, or do we need to change that to something else? That's your question, isn't it, Maura?
Oh, indeed.
I'm just curious if anybody knows of someone who has a domestic bat as a pet.
I actually went out after the last meeting and I got one.
He doesn't know he's domesticated yet, but he
Yeah,
is.
he's in
Yeah.
trouble.
I mean, I think that the turtle line is a good one. I think, I mean, any of it, right? Any little animal that has like I'm so sorry, that has like a fecal parasite is zoonotic. So really it's just about like hygiene. Wash your hands. But yeah. Good practice. Yeah, wash your hands. Don't play with it and chew on your fingers. Yeah.
Okay, in all seriousness, if we did change that item, just to say what would be the larger category to go up to that red-eared turtles would be included in?
I mean, I would say maybe include just like reptiles. And turtles. Yeah.
Like, should we or could we change that to sort of reptiles, including red-eared
Well,
that would
like reptiles and like amphibians.
reptiles and amphibians,
There it is.
comma,
Yep.
including red-eared turtles,
Yep.
also known as painted turtles,
Yep.
comma, can be carriers of salmonella and shall not be
And
kept
I
in the
would say-
classroom without written documentation.
Yeah, salmonella and other zoonotic diseases that could be transmittable.
I
Blah blah blah.
definitely want to put zoonotic.
You have to put that in there. It's a good word.
But I do have a question because a lot of kids keep these little geckos as pets. Have you seen them? And I'm wondering if they're so dangerous. If do you know what I'm talking about? The little,
Like the little
geckos?
leopard geckos.
Yeah, the leopard geckos.
Yeah,
Are
'cause they
those
feel like a basketball.
dangerous also?
I wish that there was a camera that was just on the Durham administrators during the whole meeting. Just the reaction faces are just really good. I actually, yeah, please.
So that's a big change from going to a specific type of turtle to
Yeah.
going to turtles and amphibians. Okay.
Yeah,
a
I guess that's my
huge-
bigger question.
Or reptiles, sorry, reptiles and amphibians. So I would just like to make sure that we're not encompassing
Yeah.
something that is already living in our district. And so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I think that
Do we need to make the net quite that broad? Is I guess the bigger question.
I think, yeah, what I see buried in that question is sort of like, do we need to have documentation for the animals that could be potentially carriers of these things?
And is it possible to get that documentation, right? Like, does someone give such a thing?
Yeah, just like a hygiene. Wash your hands. It's not a big deal. Snakes are great. I think those animals are great.
So you would
classrooms,
actually be in
and-
favor of striking that sentence altogether? Because right now it says you can't have them unless you
Well,
have
no, that's a big deal.
confirmation.
So that red-eared, that is like a big deal. So a lot of places won't even sell them because.
So it is
of
a higher
that.
likelihood for them.
Yes, that
Okay.
a lot of yes. If you go to buy, because they're so small and they can fit in a mouth, and so yes. so they won't sell them
No turtles that fit in your mouth.
for that reason.
Wow.
So I had a question about why specifically turtles, and is it for that reason?
Yes.
I think it's yeah. It's the. I think
Is
it
it-
comes from the salmonella. I think is what the and what was the word again?
Zoonotic.
Zoonotic. That's the concern. Is like they're a vector for the pathogen.
So maybe with the higher likelihood, we just leave them in there, and then the other ones, it's wash your hands, and we don't ban them in the policy.
But where would we add wash your
I
hands?
would like to say that I agree because I think we put bats up top, right? Even though other animals we know can carry rabies, but the bats were like the biggest problem, and so that's probably why
Similar to the
it's
red-eared
similar
turtles,
to
yeah.
So
I mean, we're not banning chicken,
Okay.
right? Salmonella, right?
So based on this very good conversation that I'm very glad that Stacey
It's not even
was
that late. Why
here.
are we this bad? I try not to do that. It's always here. It's the cookies.
Okay.
I was going to say, well, I'm blaming the cookies.
It is probably the cookies.
Over-
the
over
really
so
good
sugar.
cookies that Durham, the really good cookies that Durham has. Based on this conversation, my what I'm hearing from the board is that for the purpose of second read, we leave it alone as is, and we just generally wash our hands more.
Yep. Okay, so we have a first and we have a second on the floor for the second read of those 4 policies with no material changes from the first read, despite the conversation. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. We thankfully have no unfinished business or new business. All right, so we are going to move on to 14A, B, and C. So 14A, do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a teacher of English speakers of other languages for the 24-25 school year?
Okay, that is yours. It is. This will be a very familiar name to us. It's Lynn Shea. Lynn has taught in the district for many years. The last couple of years, she has served as our teacher of English speakers of other languages, and it's been a one-year only position because we were continuously looking at what's the influx of students. Now that we have a solid population of multilingual learners, we know that we need to have this position that is in the budget. So that is why Lynn is before you to officially get her off the 1 year, and be hired for this position. Lynn has a BS in communication from the University of Southern Maine, a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages from the University of Southern Maine. She holds elementary education certification, as well as the 660 endorsement, which is for teachers of English to speakers of other languages. So she also holds that endorsement. Professionally, she's been a classroom teacher in RSU 5 since 2009. And since 2022, she has held this position on 1 year only positions. And I just want to say Lynn stepped up to the plate at a time when the district was in need of this position due to a large influx in multilingual learners. During this time, she not only completed the necessary classes for the TESOL endorsement, but she also completed a master's degree. So we certainly thank Lynn for her service to the district, her newfound passion in this position, and we'll get off the 1 year only.
All right, questions? All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Hold on, I gotta find my adjustment here. Okay, so do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a second grade teacher school? At Moore Street School for the 24-25 school year, 1 year only.
Okay, and this is, this position will be Ann Truman. Ann holds an associate's degree in special education from Kennebec Valley Community College in Fairfield, and a BS in, she will receive her BS in elementary education from University of Maine in Augusta. She has the K to 6 elementary certification, relevant experience. She was a Title I Reading and Math Ed Tech 3 at the Augusta School Department, lead teacher for the extended school year program at Windsor Elementary School in Windsor, grade 4 long-term sub at Windsor Elementary School, a Title I teacher for reading and math at Windsor. And for us, this will be a familiar name. She has been at the grade 2 teacher at Moore Street School from December of this year to June 2024 when we had a staff change. So she is now coming on board for next year, starting the year as a grade 2 teacher. References describe Anne as reflective, flexible, having a positive impact on the school, and making learning fun for children, and that she fosters family relationships.
Questions? Did you say that she has her certification?
She will have the 020 fully completed. She's on a conditional right now, but
Okay.
is fully certified. So yes, she is legal to teach me.
Beth did. That was Carolyn. Sorry, we're going to rewatch the video. Will tell you who it was. Okay, so we have our motion in a second. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. All right, last one, I promise. Do we have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a special education coordinator for the 2024-2025 school year? Kelly and Maura.
I present with you Carolyn Volk. Carolyn has a BS in education with a specialty in early childhood, elementary and special education from Temple University. She has a master's in ed leadership from the University of Southern Maine. She holds multiple certification, including the 020 K6 elementary education. She holds certification as a teacher for disabled students in grades K8 and 712. She holds the Assistant Billing Administrator certificate. She also holds the Assistant Director of Special Education for Pre-K-12. Relevant experience. She was a special education teacher at Madinock Academy in Lincoln, Maine, my alma mater, for high school a day or two ago, not when Carolyn was there. Brunswick, she also taught at Brunswick Junior High School and Harriet Beecher Stowe School in Brunswick. She's currently the Student Support Service Coordinator for Portland Public Schools. References describe Carolyn as thinking outside the box while being able to meet special education regulation. She's extremely organized, articulate, professional, collaborative, respected by colleagues, open to feedback, and has a strong connection and empathy for families.
Question? All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Welcome to our 3 new staff, or 1 new staff and 2 returning staff. Public comment? Anything you want to share? Okay, well then I would take a motion to adjourn. Maura? Kelly, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you.